Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, the bank that puts you first. They can meet your banking and financing needs for personal, agricultural, business, commercial, mortgages, and so much more. Visit firstbank.com to learn more.
The Virginia Tech Softball Regional is all set and ready to go, and we're covering it on episode 485 of the Tech Sideline podcast, which starts right now. We're recording on Thursday, May 14th, 2026 from the Tech Solutions studio in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. And today's video is brought to you by Tyrus Homes and Rich Webb. Remember to like, subscribe, and refer the show to a friend. I'm your host, Robert Bateman, joined alongside to my right, Sam Mustow, our Virginia Tech softball beat writer. And to my left, it's the one and only, the managing editor, David Cunningham. All right, guys, you ready to get into it?
Yeah,
all
right.
Sure. So our first question, simple. It's not a Q&A. I don't know why I'm saying our first question, but let's just start by recapping the ACC Tournament in Charlottesville. The Hokies made it all the way to the final, knocking off Duke and UVA on the way there. What'd you guys think of the entire weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really fun couple of days. Pizza Moore traditionally hasn't had the most success in ACC tournaments. This was the first time Virginia Tech made it to the ACC Tournament final since 2012. They were a run away from their first ACC title since 2008. That goes back to the Angela Tincher days. You know, they played pretty well this weekend, ran into just a juggernaut of a Florida State team and Jazzy Francic, who's the ACC Pitcher of the Year for a reason. But, you know, their pitching was really impressive through Emma Mazzarone and Bree Carrico and Avery Layton. They played really well against Cassidy Curd, who's a really good pitcher for Duke. I thought it was just a really impressive showing.
I thought it started with a big win over Virginia, low scoring, and then they handled Duke pretty well, shut out the Blue Devils. They're right there with Florida State, too. They scored first, and the game-winning run was scored on a pass ball. So you're right there. They had the bases loaded in the sixth inning, and they're this close. They just needed one hit, and they couldn't get it. And but I think a lot of you look at the way the Pete Moore era is gone in the ACC tournament. You know, Hokies kind of been one and done in this thing the last couple of years, and they handled it themselves really well in Charlottesville, no less. Sam was there. It looked like an awesome crowd all weekend, especially when Virginia Tech was playing. And that was two big wins. And you beat Florida State, and it's probably a different discussion what we're about to have. You're so close to an ACC championship, and I think they kind of did everything they could. And you mentioned Avery Layton. I thought she was terrific. Came in, relieved Emma Mazzarone, shut out Florida State in her couple innings. Just needed a little bit more in terms of offense.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because you look at it, and the Hokies only gave up 3 runs across the 3 games, yet they end up losing the final. What'd you guys think of simply just how the team played? It felt like everything was clicking for the Hokies throughout the entire weekend.
Yeah, they were good. So in their they played a 3-game set at Virginia in April, and then ironically their first game in the quarterfinal was also against Virginia. Excuse me. And they didn't hit a home run in their first 4 games at Palmer Park, and then came out, and I believe they hit a lot. They hit,
I think 4.
Yeah, they hit 4.
Duke.
They hit 4 against Duke the day after, and their offense was impressive. But really, what really impressed me was their pitching. You know, Emma Mazzarone struck out a career high 14 batters in the quarterfinal against Virginia. Walked 5 batters. Control. Mazzarone would be the first to admit that sometimes her control isn't always the best, but when you strike out 14 batters, you can walk as many as you want. And then Bree Carrico then came in for 5 2/3 innings, held down Duke, left with forearm tightness. She said she was fine. Pete Moore said she was fine. She didn't pitch in the championship game, but they didn't really need her because they started Mazzarone and then brought in Avery Layton, who threw 4 shutout innings against, the 9 seed in the NCAA Tournament coming up this week. I thought it was just a really good showing. It just seemed like they clicked.
Yeah, I think, low scoring games for the most part. They did a really good job, I thought, really just being able to get out of innings and limit stuff. Like even when Mazzarone walked someone, there were a couple times where Virginia or even Florida State in the championship game had runners on in troubling positions with only 1 out, maybe, or no outs, and the Hokies played really good defense and were able to kind of escape. And outside of, Florida State against Francic, who obviously is an outstanding pitcher, the offense was really good too. I'm interested to see what the carryover is into the NCAAs, because they've been playing really well lately. I think if you look at the last couple weeks, they've been on fire. Just happened to play a dominant Florida State team that has kind of been cruising as of late, and there's a reason why Florida State's a top 16 team in the country.
And they were right there against Florida State. Not to pick at Scabs a little too much, but Kylie Aldridge was probably like 4 feet away from. She hit like a towering fly ball that went like just foul, but 4 feet to the left, that's a home run, and that's that's a bunch of runs in the top of the 6th inning against, again, a really, really good team. They were there against Florida State the whole time. Just sometimes softball happens.
Yeah, I think Aldridge drew a walk, and that loaded the bases, and it's like, okay, she hits at homer, and all of a sudden you're looking at 3 runs, and Virginia Tech's up 4-2 against Florida State, and all you have to do is turn to Avery Layton and close down an ACC championship game. One of those, just it's kind of the way it goes sometimes, and you need maybe 1 or 2 better at-bats and completely different game, but they have reason to have a lot of confidence. The way they played over the last couple weeks, the way they've handled themselves. I mean, even going back to the North Carolina series, North Carolina, Syracuse coming to ACC tournament and playing well, and Virginia's no pushover, Duke's no pushover. They really, I thought that Duke game was outstanding. Just the way they really took it to the Blue Devils. Duke didn't really breathe much all game, like constantly under pressure. Tech really got to the pitchers, and then it's kind of a toss up in that Florida State game, and to play the ACC champs 2-1. I mean, and Florida State's like the golden program in ACC softball. All things considered, the only way it could have been better is if they had won it.
Well, the Hokies come up just a little bit short in the ACC Tournament final. We'll take a quick break for one of our sponsors, Tyrus Homes, and then we'll be right back with Selection Sunday. Are you ready for a custom home tailored to your distinctive lifestyle? At Tyrus Homes, a leading custom home builder in the New River Valley, we pride ourselves on crafting exceptional residences that our clients love to call home. Whether you're a first-time buyer, a growing family in search of more room, or an active adult seeking a relaxing retreat, looking for a high-end custom home that offers luxury and sophistication, we have the perfect solution for you. Discover how we can bring your dream home to life at tyrushomes.com. That's TYRIS homes.com. All right, so Selection Sunday was the day after the championship game, and Virginia Tech was seeded as one of the top 4 teams to host a regional. They ended up getting drawn as a 5 seed. They will go to Baton Rouge to play South Alabama on Friday at 4 p.m. with a potential matchup of number 16 LSU on Saturday. What are your guys' takeaways from the Selection Sunday show?
I mean, so, being one of the top 4 teams to not host a regional it's probably disappointing for the team. I mean, we can get into the hotels thing that probably comes up next. That's a whole other thing. I think there was a world where Virginia Tech was just legitimately the 17th best team in the country. Natalie Hannen was the chair of the selection committee. She had a Zoom media availability right after the selection show, and she said the last 2 bubble hosting spots came down to Virginia Tech and then the 2 teams that got the 15 and 16 seeds, which were Texas A&M and LSU. I'm going to read out a bunch of stats. So Virginia Tech finished 18th in the RPI with the 57th best strength of schedule and 8 top 25 wins. LSU was 19th in the RPI with the 9th best strength of schedule and 11 top 25 wins. Texas A&M 17th in the RPI with the 7th strength of schedule and 14 top 25 wins. It's those strength of schedule metrics that really put LSU and A&M over the top. And the thing is that it's easier for SEC teams to have higher strengths of schedules because the SEC is it's forever the best softball conference, and Virginia Tech has to try and schedule those in the non-conference. They went on the road 3 of the first 4 weekends against South Carolina and then Georgia and Auburn, and Georgia ended up being, I think, the 10th seed or the 11th seed in the NCAA tournament. But South Carolina and Auburn didn't turn out to be great teams, and that didn't raise their strength of schedule metric all that much. And I'm not sure that's necessarily something anyone did wrong, but that's just kind of how it went.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think if you're Virginia Tech, you come so close to hosting, and this is the 2nd year in a row that they've been right there on the fringe. I think you have to look back at what happened against Georgia Tech at Tech Softball Park, a month ago, where if you win, you don't slip up there, and you're probably a little bit better off. And also that Liberty midweek game that they lost. But I think from a strength of schedule standpoint, the only two teams in the top 20 that had strength of schedules below 50 were Virginia Tech and Texas Tech. But Texas Tech only had 6 losses on the year. Virginia Tech, you just can't really afford to slip up in certain areas. It really stinks because, when the staff sets out to schedule stuff earlier in the year, you're trying to schedule the best opponents possible. And you don't know how South Carolina, Auburn, Georgia are going to be. Well, Georgia's really, really good. But South Carolina finished about 25th in the RPI, and Auburn was about 35th, 33rd, I think. The difficult part with that is it also comes down to who you play in the ACC, too. And Virginia Tech had Duke, but missed Florida State, missed Clemson. Like some of the other really good ACC teams, you just didn't play them. Yeah. So as a result, your strength of schedule isn't as high. So it really it's a weird formula. That's why I said you beat Florida State in the ACC championship game. It's a completely different discussion because you're the ACC champ. You beat the best ACC team, in terms of metrics, Florida State. Really came up 2 runs short of really having – just kind of putting a stamp on a top 16 ranking.
Yeah, and like they played Clemson this year. They played a 3-game set at Tech softball park, but Clemson wasn't as good as Clemson normally is. So that didn't provide the boost that it normally would. So the margin for error in the RPI, which just to be clear, it's the rating percentage index. I think I got that right. It factors in record and strength of schedule. And the margin for error for ACC teams is so much more limited than it is if you're in the SEC and to a lesser extent the Big Ten, just because the conference just isn't necessarily as strong, and you have to play your conference series. There's no way around that. And so it's how you stack up your non-conference schedule, and there's just so much more variation in that. So LSU had 11 top 25 wins. They were 11-16 in the top 25, but they played 27 games against top 25 teams. Texas A&M, they went 14-14 versus top 10 versus top 25 teams, but that's 28 games in the top 25. And when Virginia Tech doesn't have that number, they played 12 games against the top 25 RPI teams. But when you only play half those, you just don't have that margin for error. So when you slip up, when you drop 3 in a row to Georgia Tech, and then at Liberty, all games at home, all games arguably Virginia Tech should have won. When you drop those, that just your margin for error goes just completely down.
Yeah. Well, and they also brought up the quadrant 3 and quadrant 4 losses too. Virginia Tech had more than both. It's interesting. You look at the RPI and the ACC. There are 4 teams in the top 20 in the ACC and the RPI. Virginia Tech only played one of them in the regular season. That was Duke. Florida State at 10, Duke at 12, Stanford at 16. Clemson's there at 24, and I forgot that they played Clemson at home. Virginia's at 26, North Carolina's at 43, Georgia Tech's at 45, which isn't probably as bad of a loss, but it's when you factor in that your opportunities against the top teams are so limited, you got to take advantage of them when they happen. And Tech was 8-4 against top 25 teams. That's okay, but I think when you crunch the numbers, like you could argue that they probably should have been in, but I think the SEC's numbers are just better simply because they're better teams in that league and they're all playing each other. It's kind of the same way we look at with SEC football and SEC men's basketball and women's basketball. Sometimes it's, that when you play other really good teams all the time, like if I'm the ACC, one of the things I'd potentially be looking into, and not just a softball thing, but across all sports, is how can we try year over year to schedule our team, the best teams against each other, like making sure Virginia Tech and Florida State and Virginia Tech and Clemson are playing each other in softball. The same way you want Virginia Tech and Miami to play each other in football, because you want the best teams to have an opportunity to beat the best teams. Because let's be honest, Virginia Tech goes up to Syracuse for the last ACC series of the year, and it's like that kills Tech's RPI if it even slips up. It has to be perfect, and it was, but it's just really difficult when there's such a wide gap in terms of the best and the worst in the ACC.
I think it's also really frustrating when you just look at the start of the season for the softball team, right? They were sweeping basically every invitational they went to outside of Charlotte. So it's so tough because they racked up so many early season wins, and then it didn't necessarily lead to them hosting a regional like we thought that softball would.
Well, and also like they had the best start in program history. I think it was 20-2.
20-2 through 22.
Yeah,
games.
going through the Invitational in Salem. But this similar thing happened the last 2 years. 2 years ago, they went up to Syracuse for the last regular season series, just like they did this year. But that time, they dropped 2 of 3 games. Last year, they went to Pitt in April and dropped 2 of 3 games. It's, again, there's so little margin for error for these teams. And softball is such a random sport, and they play so many games that you're not going to run the table. You're probably going to lose some games that you shouldn't lose. Not Oklahoma a couple years ago, I think went 61-1. Like that's not the norm. That's not how it works. They're entering the NCAA tournament. Virginia Tech is 46-10, and there are a couple losses in there they probably shouldn't have lost. But you look around the country, teams are going to lose games they shouldn't lose. I think Oklahoma lost to some team, I forgot which one it was, that they definitely should not have lost. This happens.
Yeah, one more point on the SEC. 10 teams in the top 20 of the RPI. The SEC's lowest team is Kentucky at 53. You want to know how many ACC teams are below Kentucky? 6. NC State, Notre Dame, Pitt, Syracuse, Cal, and Boston College. And I want to say Tech played 3 of them. Again, from a numbers sake, like part of it just falls on the scheduling gods a little bit, because you're not going to be perfect and you're going to lose some games. But it's just really easy for the SEC to, and I know people on Twitter are like, oh, the SEC bias, and it's like, well, they play the better teams, and it's really difficult when their metrics are better just as a result, the byproduct of who they're playing. Like, there's not a lot Virginia Tech can do except try to go out and play in the best non-conference tournaments possible. So they try to get the best teams possible, and you got to beat them. But you also need a little bit of help from the ACC too. And also you got to win, again, like you beat Florida State, and we're probably having a little bit of a different discussion, because I think that would have probably said, okay, Virginia Tech's a top 16 team. You're the ACC champ. You beat a 1 seed, but you just kind of take those opportunities when they come. And I thought Tech did an okay job with it. Not perfect, and might have had to be perfect.
So earlier this week, Virginia Tech gave us a statement regarding the Hokies' chances at hosting a regional. Can you guys just walk us through the entire process of what the statement is, why are we getting it, and how did we get here?
Okay, so before we get to that point, there is an extensive process for schools to be able to put together a bid to host regionals. So I believe by April, they have to submit a bunch of information to the NCAA and say, yes, we have the infrastructure to take care of this. We can do X, Y, and Z. We've got the facilities, which Virginia Tech does have, and the hotels within a 30-mile and 45-minute radius to be able to make this work. Obviously, this weekend's graduation. Blacksburg is not a large place, and there are not a ton of hotels in the area, and the hotels that are available are booked for graduation. Also, crucially, in that radius, Roanoke doesn't count. I believe Roanoke is outside of the range. So you're kind of looking at Blacksburg, Christiansburg, and Salem. So that's a little bit of background that's important there. So
Yeah, I mean, Dublin, Pulaski, too, just down the... But, yes. There are not many hotels in that radius outside of Virginia, outside of Blacksburg and Radford and Christiansburg.
And then, so they put together a bid, and the school didn't really say whether or not it had been confirmed or denied. We'd heard a couple rumblings here and there, nothing definitive, but like, hey, this could perhaps be an issue. I mean, I know from my perspective, I'm graduating this weekend. Rob, you're graduating too. Like, hotels are not easy to get this weekend. I don't envy the position anyone's in. So the selection show happened. Virginia Tech was announced as one of the 4 top teams to not host. And then was the call we mentioned a couple minutes ago with the head of the selection committee. And that's when, she got asked, like, hey, was the bid denied? She said the bid was denied, and then repeatedly said it did not impact their decision on if Virginia Tech was a top 16 seed or not. It's very much worth noting that based on the metrics we were talking about a couple minutes ago, Virginia Tech very easily, actually I would say likely, was the 17 seed, just aside from the hotels. But then Virginia Tech provided Tech Sideline with a statement confirming that their bid was denied, and just based on, honestly, it's just unfortunate timing and geography. I don't know if there's anything anyone necessarily could have done. Everyone's just kind of in a bad spot here.
Yeah, I mean, logistically, there's not a lot Virginia Tech can do here in this area. There are just only so many hotels to go around. Roanoke and Salem are not really, they're too far away. They're over 30 miles away. I mean, like from Tech Softball Park to Roanoke College, it's over 30 miles. That's just a fact. And as a result, it's graduation weekend. Hotels are ridiculously expensive. There's no way. I think a lot of people would play devil's advocate a little bit and say, well, can't Virginia Tech hold hotels? You're talking 30 rooms per team, 90 rooms total across 3 different hotels, and they have to have meeting space. It's not like you can put them up in a motel or a Days Inn.
Yeah.
They have to be very nice hotels. Graduation hotels are booked a year out in advance. This is the busiest weekend of the year in town, outside of a really good spring game weekend. Logistically, it's just very, very, very difficult. And my brother's graduating, talking to my parents, talking to other people who are coming in to book hotels for a weekend. It's a 3-night minimum, and hotel rooms are starting at like $500. You're talking about, all in all, if you wanted to get ahead and try to reserve stuff, you're talking about sitting on like $150,000 just waiting. And that's just, it's not feasible. It is logistically not feasible. There are not enough hotel rooms around, and it sucks. Like, it's a logistical nightmare. Now some people were making jokes about, well, like what happens on a football weekend? Like, and it's like, well, those dates in advance before they're announced. If Virginia Tech is hosting Pitt on a Friday night, Virginia Tech can work with Pitt, and before that date becomes available, and say, hey, we're going to reserve this, or you can reserve these hotel rooms before it comes out. A lot of times athletics teams come into town, they stay at the same places, right? One of the popular areas is, I think it's the Hyatt property that's right across from the Virginia Tech Inn, right? Guarantee you the Hyatt property across from the Virginia Tech Inn was booked out a year in advance for graduation. It's just not really a feasible scenario. I think what people forget about is that where graduation falls compared to NCAA softball, Virginia Tech's graduation is either going to fall essentially on ACC's or NCAA weekend every single year. ACC Tournament or NCAA regionals. That's just the way it is, as long as the calendar's laid out this way. And guess what? If Virginia Tech's not hosting ACCs, it's not really a problem if it falls on ACC weekend, because then you can host NCAAs the next weekend. But on the off chance it falls on NCAA regionals weekend here or there, well, that's a problem, because you don't have the infrastructure for it. We're talking about Southwest Virginia, and it's very funny because, Virginia Tech's going down to Baton Rouge, the state capital of Louisiana. LSU has graduation this weekend, but LSU is Baton Rouge is a giant metropolitan area. Baton Rouge alone is about 220,000 people. And remember, we're not including Roanoke in this for Virginia Tech. So it's just Blacksburg and Christiansburg. The infrastructure, unfortunately, just is not there when you try to add the NCAA requirement hotels on top of graduation. It's really just a terrible situation as a whole, and it stinks that Virginia Tech can't host.
Gonna add on a couple things to that. So the NCAA requires teams to be able to basically negotiate down the hotel rate. It's something like a market rate, something like no more than $185 a night, which pretty much any other weekend, again, would not be an issue. It's graduation weekend. Like, hotels are much, much more than that in this area. That and what hotels would agree to taking that price deduction, and again, one of their most profitable weekends of the year. I'm going to read now a quote from Natalie Hannen, the chair of the selection committee, because it's kind of an all-encompassing quote, and she kind of got a bunch of follow-up questions about this, and here's what she said. She said, "What I'm saying is that Virginia Tech was not a top 16 seed, so from a host perspective, if there was a situation that Tech was in the top 16 seed, they were not going to be able to host because of the locations of the hotels were outside of our parameters. But that did not come into our thought process when we were seeding the top 16. And that just kind of covers everything. Also, I would be remiss to mention, so Salem's Moyer Sports Complex, which hosted the Hokie Invite a couple weeks ago, has had a travel softball tournament booked there for a very long time, and that was not an option. And I know that's at the very least something that they asked about.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're Virginia Tech in the future, it might be something worth looking into. Yeah. See, like if graduation is on the books and it's going to conflict with the potential regional, that it just stinks at the timing of it all that there's something already booked that weekend. But if you can schedule that in advance, I mean, they've got a good relationship with the people at the Moyer Softball Complex, and you've covered many games. You guys have covered many games there at this point. Like, very nice facilities, and I think it would be great to host an NCAA regional. But that's something that you probably gotta reserve that space in advance.
Yeah, and it sounds like, again, to the best of our knowledge, Virginia Tech's just in a bad spot here with timing and geography. It seems like they truly did all they could. The NCAA is really stringent about these hotel requirements. I'm not sure necessarily how creative they could have gotten. They weren't going to let them take it out of the 30-mile radius. So, like, if they found hotels in Roanoke, so they provided hotels. Hannen said they provided hotels that were about a 50-minute drive away. I don't entirely know where that is. It could be Roanoke, could be somewhere in West Virginia, but the NCAA is very stringent about these requirements, and everyone's just in a really bad spot here.
All right. Well, we got another ad break for you here on the TSL podcast, so we'll send you over to a read from Rich Webb.
This episode of the Tech Sideline podcast is brought to you by Rich Webb, your local provider of top-tier IT managed services. For 30 years, Rich Webb has offered a comprehensive suite of cutting-edge solutions tailored to empower businesses of all sizes in today's digital age. From top-tier network engineering services, ensuring seamless connectivity and security, to our exceptional managed endpoint and cloud services, providing proactive maintenance and strategic optimization, we're dedicated to delivering excellence at every turn. Rich Webb, driving enterprise IT. Visit richwebb.com to learn more. Rich Webb has proudly hosted TechSideline.com for over 2 decades.
All right, so we've kind of set the stage at this point. The Baton Rouge Regional, let's just dive right into it. The Hokies' first take on South Alabama. What stands out to you guys about the Jaguars?
They've got a really good pitcher in Riley Harrison. She has an 18-12 record with a 2.42 earned run average across a team high 197 innings. It's a little bit similar to what Virginia Tech saw last year in its first game. Last year, the Hokies played Belmont with Maya Johnson, who still is one of the most dominant pitchers in the country. She's going to Tuscaloosa. I'm excited to see that game. That'll be fun. And ran into a really good pitcher, and then Virginia Tech just kind of took care of her. They need to set the tone by playing a good game against Riley Harrison, and then moving on to perhaps most likely 16th seed LSU the next day.
Yeah, I think Harrison stands out just from her pure numbers, as far as, like, she's got the 7th most innings pitched in the country. She's got the 4th most pitching appearances. 44. She's thrown 197 innings this year, and she's got 17 complete games. She's really, really good. Virginia Tech, I would say the strength is the bats. And if you're the Hokies, you're probably looking at your chops at this one, and it'll be very challenging, I'm sure, facing a really good pitcher. But at the same time, it's like, this is what you prepare all year for, to get to this spot in the NCAA tournament where you're hitting the ball hard, as Pete Demore likes to say, and you make contact. And I think this will be a really intriguing matchup as far as Virginia Tech's offense against a really good pitcher who, as we talked about earlier, Sam, probably just going to throw as long as she can. They're going to ride or die with her.
The other two teams in the regional, the Akron Zips and, of course, the LSU Tigers. What stands out to you guys about this entire regional? It feels like the Hokies are in a pretty solid spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Virginia Tech's the 17 seed going against the 16 seed. It's never easy to go to an SEC school on the road and win. Thing is, Virginia Tech has sort of kind of done that 6 times this year already. It's certainly well within the realm of possibility. LSU primarily uses Jaden Heavener and CC Solera in the circle. Heavener has a 12-8 record, 2.88 ERA, and 109 strikeouts, 126 innings. Solera has an 8-5 record, 3.32 ERA, and 45 strikeouts. They're LSU is a good team. They've maybe had a little bit more of an up and down season than what they usually have. And, I think this is certainly winnable for Virginia Tech. I'm not sure if they'll see Akron or not. Akron won the MAC. Pete Demore likes to say all the time that everyone in regionals is good. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Sippy is an awesome mascot. And, I certainly think this is a winnable regional.
I think LSU's pitching and defense, both really good. But this is winnable from the Virginia Tech perspective of this is why you scheduled Georgia, Auburn, and South Carolina early in the year. So you could go get experience playing SEC teams on the road, and now you're going to walk into the same kind of environment. LSU is a pretty dominant softball program, and it's interesting. Like you look at some of the pitching stats, 16th in fielding percentage, 16th in hits allowed per 7 innings. Their bats are okay, but again, it's an SEC team playing at home, right? And I don't know if the Hokies will see Akron. It's worth mentioning. Megan Lee is Akron's leading hitter, and she hits .418 on the year. So Akron's bats are its strength, kind of the opposite of South Alabama, which is more pitching heavy. But I think this is an interesting regional from the perspective of Virginia Tech, because I think Virginia Tech and LSU are both pretty balanced. I would say in some ways that Virginia Tech might be stronger in some areas. But if you get 2 or 3 games between the Hokies and the Tigers, you honestly might just flip a coin. I think it's going to be a really interesting regional, and I think the one thing that interests me is Virginia Tech's pitching depth. I think LSU's probably saying the same thing. Tech's bats are better, I think, but maybe balances out a little bit when you're playing against pitchers at home. You're on the road, but assuming Carrico is okay, that's a pretty good 1-2 punch with her and Mazaron, as we've seen all year. You add in Avery Layton to the mix, and I think if those 3 are on their game, you're facing an LSU team that maybe bats aren't as good. This could be a very favorable regional if you're Virginia Tech. So I think you've seen them all year kind of rise to the occasion, play really well. And again, they're coming off of a weekend in Charlottesville where they beat 2 really good teams and played another one really close. And you could argue should have won that game. They just needed one more hit. So they've got a lot of reasons to be very confident heading into this one. And I'm excited for it. I think there's a really good chance they're the best team in this regional. And if you're Virginia Tech, you can't really let oh man, I wish we were playing at home. Oh man, I wish we were hosting. Man, we didn't get a top 16 seed. Knowing Pete Demore, knowing this team, it doesn't seem like they'll let that get to them. They'll be very motivated heading into this one, and go show everyone in Baton Rouge kind of what they're capable of.
What does this team need to do to look back on the season and view it as a success, right? Because they had the best start in program history through 22 games, and they've made a regional. But I think the question now is, if this Virginia Tech team doesn't make a super regional, is the season a failure or a success?
I wouldn't say it's a failure. I think they've honestly probably already exceeded our expectations. Going into the season, we didn't really know how the pitching would hold up. We didn't know that Bree Carrico would come in and be the ACC Freshman of the Year. That took care of that problem. And Emma Mazaron has taken steps forward, and Avery Layton towards the end of the season, especially, she hit 70, 71 with really, really good stuff. I'm not sure if they lose this regional, if you're looking at it as a disappointment because the sport's so random that sometimes you lose games and it's not necessarily an indictment on the program. But I think this regional is very, very winnable. And I think, Virginia Tech is going down there and expecting to win. And I'm not sure that's an unreasonable expectation.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at Virginia Tech's season as a whole. It's been really good. It's kind of been what we expect under Pete DeMoore. Excellence. 46-10, 18-6 in the ACC. Very few slip-ups. You can count on two hands the number of times they've lost this year. Few teams in the country can say that. I mean, you look at the number one overall seed in the NCAA tournament is Alabama. Alabama has 7 losses. Virginia Tech's right there. I think as far as like a bracket shaping up, I think this is maybe one of the more favorable regionals Virginia Tech could have gotten in terms of you're going to a team, you got to play them. LSU's good, but I think Virginia Tech, you could argue, is better. And I don't know that it's a failure if Tech doesn't get out of it. I actually think how the Hokies performed in the ACC tournament probably makes it, to this point, a better season than many expected because the Hokies have not been good, in ACC tournaments under Pete DeMoore, and they were very good. I mean, the craziest thing is they hit, if they get a hit, Kylie Aldridge or someone else with the bases loaded there in the 6th and win the ACC tournament, you're talking about it's already been a very successful season regardless of what happens this weekend. So I think I wouldn't say it's a failure because I think they've had a really good year, but it would be really interesting to see them in a super regional against probably Alabama, best team in the country in Tuscaloosa, but it's not a situation Tech shied away from. So it's tough, Rob. I don't want to say that they've had a failure or it would be a failure if they didn't make it out of the regional. Because like Sam said, softballs can be very random at times and you don't know situationally. For example, what happens if something happened to Carrico again and you don't necessarily have her at full strength, right? You're just relying on Mazzarone and Layton. What if that's enough, right? Situationally, that would be a little bit tough to overcome against a pretty good LSU team, but maybe you overcome it. I think it kind of comes down to how these games turn out this weekend. That game, I believe it will be on Saturday, that game between the Hokies and Tigers, all eyes will be on that. But also take a step back and think about it from the perspective of Virginia Tech athletics as a whole this year. We're talking about wrestling and softball as the two best sports this season. Wrestling obviously fared really well all year, won the ACC regular season title and won the ACC tournament, finished 11th at the NCAAs. I think if Virginia Tech softball gets out of this regional, you're saying both of them had pretty comparable years as far as they're the two best sports at this school. And as we talked about in a podcast last week, women's basketball and women's golf and maybe baseball, kind of jury, we'll see. They've got a big series this weekend against Clemson, but jury's still out a little bit. But it's been such a down year for Virginia Tech athletics as a whole, as far as programs making the NCAA tournament or faring really well in the postseason, that I think I would expect to see a lot of Virginia Tech fans kind of rally around, especially how popular the softball program is, rally around them this weekend. And it'll be very interesting to see if they can kind of put a cherry on top as far as capping off Virginia Tech's athletic year. A little bit depends on what baseball does, but I think when you put it in context like that, think about how Virginia Tech football only won 3 games this year, right? Softball, I think, has kind of exceeded expectations from a win-loss record standpoint. So it's difficult to kind of put a pass-fail on it, I think, when you get to this part of the postseason. But I think they've got a really good chance to surprise maybe some national people this weekend that are looking and going, oh, Virginia Tech, the second best team in this regional, not hosting. Tech might go, okay, well, we deserve to be here and we deserve to host.
All right. Well, Hokie softball will be back in action on Friday, May 15th at 4 p.m. in the Baton Rouge Regional, taking on South Alabama. All of the games will be streamed on ESPN Plus for the Regional in case you want to check those out. What's coming up on TSL before we get out of here this week, guys?
You're going to be reading a lot about softball over the next couple days. Got a preview. David will get that to you today. We'll get a preview up today and then, ahead of a lot of softball this weekend.
Yeah, do you know if Chip's going down to Baton Rouge?
I'm not sure. We'll ask Chip.
Yeah, we'll ask Chip. I'm sure there'll be especially given how it was in Charlottesville last weekend. I know Baton Rouge isn't exactly close, but I think there'll be probably a pretty good Tech crowd. They've had good fans all year, of course. As far as what's coming up on TSL, baseball series starts today against Clemson, kind of make or break for the Hokies. They're backs against the wall against a Clemson team that's probably better than its record suggests. Curious to see how the Hokies fare. Anyone in town this weekend, that's the one sporting event at home. I would suggest go check it out. It was really cool. I don't know if you saw the UNCG series last weekend, but last couple weekends now, there's been a bunch of college students who have put a couch out on the hill in the outfield, and they're I think UNCG or Tech, maybe it was Nick Licurdo, I think. Maybe it was both. It hit home runs really to them, where they're just a group of 10 guys sitting out there with a cooler and a couch in the outfield. So pretty good vibes over at English Field right now, and I think they've got a really good opportunity to kind of put a stamp on their NCAA Tournament resume. Besides that, I know Chris will have a Q&A this week, and I think Andy might be working on a mailbag. Not quite sure, but Andy wrote a really good football feature yesterday and has more football stuff coming. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I don't know if we're going to toss it over to Nick, but I know there's some audio-video stuff too.
Yeah, Nick, take it away.
Well, first off, we just have Bud Foster this week. Great podcast, talked about his most memorable games while coaching here. But Sam and Rob are graduating. So, yeah, congratulations, guys. I know, Rob, you brought your cap and gown. I kind of wanted you to wear it, but if Sam didn't have it, I was like, I'm not going to force him to do it.
We talked about it, and then I forgot.
Yeah, I was under the impression I was wearing it for the Q&A, which we had to cancel.
Yeah, I feel bad about that, but
I will come back.
It was good, and I'm really proud of you guys, and so happy that y'all got to work here with us, and we had a blast every single year that you guys were with us. And Rob, I know you have done countless video, audio stuff for us, and Sam, you've written feels like thousands of softball articles for TSL. So thank you guys, and good luck in your future endeavors, and know that you guys are always welcomed here.
Yeah, it's so fun. We don't usually get to celebrate outgoing podcast hosts usually. And Rob, you've done a tremendous job, especially with, I know, the basketball shows. Unfortunately, maybe not as exciting from a men's basketball perspective as they could have been, but it was fun talking with the women with you every week. And I know you and Chris, your Friday Q&A thing was always awesome. From a writer's perspective, I feel like I never really get a chance to talk about the writers before they leave. Had so many good ones over the years. Chris Hirons, Raza Umarani, Dylan Tefta, obviously he's still got a year left, thankfully, covering baseball for us. But Sam, I'm so proud of you in terms of the way you've grown over these last couple of years. Feels like you've been writing for Tech Sideline for forever, and I'm really going to miss you. Don't know what I'm going to do without you covering softball for us, but you and Chip have made a really good team over there, and I'm glad. I remember when we first got you in the boat, and I was trying to figure out, man, where could I put Sam? And I was like, I think he would really enjoy just the camaraderie of the softball program, a sport that really fun to be around, pretty low key. Pete Demore is an awesome guest to have both on the podcast, but also as far as interviews go, he's pretty laid back. And both of you guys, I know, have built a really good relationship with him, and I'm sure you guys will look back on that. But I'm so glad we put you on softball, because I know that Tech Softball Park has kind of become your home over the last couple of years. So.
Yes, it's the most fun sport to cover because the team wins a ton, the people are nice, and it's the best.
Yeah, a little bit different from some of the other sports that I've had to cover over the last couple of years that have not won as much. But really proud of both of you guys, and you'll have to come back and visit. Come back and watch some Tech softball games next year when they host a regional at home.
We definitely will. Well, thank you guys for all the kind words. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been such a great experience. I'm just so grateful to everyone here at TSL and everyone who's, watched and read the stuff. It's been great.
There's no other job I've enjoyed more than my time in Blacksburg. I remember when I got hired as a sophomore, I was doing basically Nick's job where I was just producing. And it was like the scariest thing in the world because I was like, someone's going to see every mistake I make, So thank you guys for this opportunity. And thank you all for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, refer the show to a friend as always. Check out all our socials at Tech Sideline, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. We've probably got it. A big thank you to Sam Mustow and David Cunningham on set, Nick Brown behind the scenes. I'm Robert Bateman. We'll see you next time on the Tech Sideline podcast.